him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Hello, this is Paula Schaffner, and welcome back to On the Spot. This week I'll be looking at episode 14 of Welcome Back, Kotter, The Longest Weekend. The IMDb summary is Kotter begins to behave erratically when he learns that Julie will be going on a weekend ski trip, marking the first time that they've been separated since their marriage. This episode aired on January 6th, 1976, the first time in 3 weeks, although of course there had been the holidays in between. It was directed by Bob Lehendra again. The episode was written by Carl Kleinschmidt, who was born in 1937 in Los Angeles, and he died in 2022. He started writing with The Joey Bishop Show in 1964-65. He did 9 Dick Van Dyke episodes, 7 Gomer Pyles, 5 That Girls, 3 Courtships of Eddie's Father, 2 MASHs, and he was the writing supervisor for the infamous Brady Bunch Variety Hour. He didn't do much writing in the 80s, and his last credit is the 1991 TV movie Hi Honey, I'm Dead. His only other Welcome Back Kotter credit is on a clip show. In the cold opening, the Kotters are playing Chinese checkers. They're both dressed casually, including Jean, so it's probably the weekend. He asks if he told her last week what happened to his Aunt Esther. She says he never even told her he had an Aunt Esther, so she's still finding out about some of his relatives at this point. Esther got a telegram and insisted on it being a singing telegram, but it turned out to be about her sister Rose being dead at the age of 88. So I wondered if maybe this was actually a great aunt of Gabe's, since he's still in his 20s. Instead of the first main scene being set at the school, as usual, this one opens with Julie in the kitchen just staring at the meatloaf she's making. Gabe comes home from work to applause. She unhappily seasons the meatloaf as he hangs up his jacket. He comes over, says hiya, puts one hand on her arm, the other around her neck, and kisses her forehead. She doesn't react. So he physically turns her head and kisses her on the mouth. He says, well, I see I got that same old magic. She sighs. Still looking at the meatloaf, she says she didn't hear him come in. He looks at her, takes away the peppermill, and asks if she's okay. She turns to him and yells at him to look at her, so he looks at her with a series of goofy faces. She says she's an intelligent person, and he agrees. She says she's a college graduate, and that's the first time that this has come up. I believe that there is more about Julie's college degree later. He says he knows. She says she's watching Meatloaf, so he suggests she look at some lettuce for a while. She crosses her arms and goes to the couch as he says he's sorry. He asks what the problem is. She says Candy Lieberman came over today. He sits and says, oh, Candy Lieberman is a definite problem. He puts one hand on Julie's knee and the other on her back. Julie says she knows Candy is not his favorite neighbor. He says he and Candy don't like each other. Every time he goes to take out the garbage, she boos. Julie stands and says it's not Gabe personally, it's husbands in general. Candy had a very bad marriage. He says of course it was a bad marriage. Candy was the wife. Julie says Candy is thrilled about being single. She was over here today flaunting her freedom. She's going to Vermont to go skiing this weekend. And I looked that up. It's approximately a 5-hour drive, 8 hours by bus or train, so keep that in mind for later in the episode. Gabe says Julie could go skiing if she wanted to. Julie says that's what she told Candy, so Candy asked Julie to go with her. Julie said she'd have to ask her husband. As Julie turns away and crosses her arms, Gabe stands and says she doesn't have to ask him. He stands behind her and puts his hands on her hips as he says they have a free and equal relationship. This is a very 70s thing, that even though she's a housewife, they have an equal relationship. They're very modern, allegedly. He says if one of them wants to do something, they just do it. He wants her to go over and tell Candy that she'll go skiing with her this weekend. Julie turns, smiles, nods, and says she already did. So she was staging this whole thing just to get Gabe to say yes? Did it act like she had to ask his permission? Or maybe she felt guilty that this was coming up. And obviously there's a history here with Candy Lieberman, who we never see, and I don't know if she's ever mentioned again. Gabe points at himself with both hands and yells, without asking me? But they playfully punch each other, smile, and then hug. And they are very physically demonstrative with each other in this scene and later. There's applause as we fade to the next scene. A historical map of the U.S. is propped against the blackboard. Unlike the usual classroom map, which is also up, it seems to have territories rather than modern states. I think it says the United States in 1783. Kotter is standing next to the map with a pointer in his hand. He's talking about the government ensuring that all men and women have the right to choose their own way of life. They fought the Revolutionary War that winter in Valley Forge, which was the winter of 1777 to 78. He taps the map and says it was cold, brutal, snow on the ground. All the lifts were open. The instructors wore tight ski pants. Now he looks mad, and obviously he's had time to think about this ski weekend. By the way, the extras are Glasses Boy, the Not Gutenberg guy, Cap Boy, Fluffy Hair, and possibly 2 new brunette white girls. They might have been there before, but I was surprised. The students look confused, and Verna Jean, as usual, is chewing gum. Arnold says, "Excuse me, Mr. Kotter, but isn't Valley Forge in Pennsylvania?" as he pronounces it. Arnold points out that Kotter is now pointing near Jackson Hole, Wyoming on the map. The others laugh, and Arnold does his laugh. Kotter self-consciously moves the pointer. Vinny asks why they always said George Washington slept here. Who cares where he slept? That was a thing. I don't think you hear that as much these days, but that was a common joke during my childhood. And previously, there would be historical signs saying George Washington slept here, obviously just on the East Coast. This might have come up on the 80s Newhart sitcom, but I'm not sure. After Vinny says, "Who cares where George Washington slept?" Freddie says, "Probably only Martha." Fluffy Hair and one of the brunettes laugh. The audience laughs and claps, but Juan just nods. Freddie confides in Juan that he thinks George Washington had a thing on the side with Betsy Ross. They bump fists. Juan inexplicably wears sunglasses throughout the episode, by the way. And I can kind of see that in the later scene, but it seems odd that there's no mention of it in the classroom. So I wondered if something was going on with Robert Hedges that week. Verna Jean looks disapproving of this gossip about George and Betsy until Horshack calls Betsy a little so-and-so, and he mimes sewing, making Verna Jean laugh. One asks Kotter if he thinks guys like George Washington messed around. Yes, I think that we hear less about George Washington than, for instance, Thomas Jefferson. To the amusement of one of the brunettes, Freddie says a guy in a powdered wig is just looking for trouble. He'd never make it 2 blocks in this neighborhood. So implying that George Washington was a sissy because he wore a powdered wig. And surprisingly, nobody does the father of his country gag, which seemed almost obligatory on sitcoms at that time. Yeah, he slept everywhere. No wonder they called him the father of his country. Verna Jean suggests that while George was away, Martha would play. Verna Jean is not in this episode much, but this is another example of how she gives the female perspective. And this, by the way, is the 7th episode with Verna Jean. Vinny doubts that Martha fooled around, and Arnold looks like he's too innocent to understand. Gabe says maybe Martha went ski with Candy Lieberman. The class is understandably confused. The bell rings and the students start to leave. Verna Jean looks at Gabe with concern. In close-up, Gabe has an expression like he's both checked out and nauseated. The 4 main sweat hogs quietly talk about how Kotter's been acting weird and they should check it out. So that's the erratic behavior. They gather around his desk and Vinny says they was all wondering what's wrong with him today. Presumably this is the afternoon class, not homeroom. Kotter is surprised by the question and says there's nothing wrong with him. Vinny says he can't kid them and Vinny has no choice but to prove it. So he starts ranking on him, and as we've seen in previous episodes, Vinny is the ranking champion of the school. And he of course does up your nose with a rubber hose. He says Kotter is so low that he could play handball against the curb. Both times the sweat hogs watch for his reaction, but Kotter just smiles feebly. Vinny says the old Kotter wouldn't have taken that. We've seen Kotter giving insults back to the sweat hogs. Arnold agrees, and then he demonstrates how Kotter should have ranked Vinny back. He says Vinny has no freckles because they'd slide off, and I don't know if that's about Italians being greasy, or he means Vinny has acne, or how we're supposed to take that. And he says if Vinny ever jumped off the George Washington Bridge, he'd leave a bathtub ring all around the Hudson River. And we usually hear more jokes about how Juan is not that clean. The audience enjoys this. Vinny steams. Juan and Freddie look wary, and Kotter is still out of it. And I just want to point out that this is a big change from Arnold's behavior in the pilot and even some of the episodes after that. He's standing up to Vinny, although he's using the excuse of acting like he thinks Kotter should have acted. But when Arnold starts to insult Vinny's mother, Vinny yells that that's enough. He doesn't say that his mother's a saint, but we already know by this point that Vinny does not like people to insult his mother. Freddie kneels and tells Mr. Kotter, and I noticed he didn't say Kotter, so that's a sign of his concern, that they're his friends and he should level with them. Kotter says there's nothing wrong. It's just that Julie went away for the weekend and they've never been separated before. We'll find out that that's even more surprising, because I thought until this point that they were still newlyweds, but that's actually not the case. Freddie stands and walks over to face the blackboard. Juan says it's a bummer, but then he grins and asks, who's the other guy? Because of course Juan assumes that Julie is fooling around and that Kotter knows this. He offers to take care of him, as in beat up the other guy for Kotter. Mr. Kotter says it's nothing like that. She just went away for the weekend. Freddie comes back and sits on the desk. desk. He says it's like his sister's husband. He went away for the weekend, and he ain't been back in 3 years. So we already knew that Freddie had at least one brother, and now we find out that he has an older sister. Vinny says Freddie is right, and he'll put it as delicately as possible. Kotter has been dumped. Take it from Vinny. There's only one way to get over a woman. Find another one. And we'll see how that will play out over the course of the series. Vinny sits on another part of the desk and takes out a little black book because, of course, he has to have a little black book, just like Fonzie or Larry on Three's Company. Arnold peers over Vinny's shoulder as Vinny says he knows a girl who's a little too old for him. She's 19 and she's ready to trot. So I thought that was interesting that they didn't say hot to trot. Maybe the censors thought ready was less racy. No pun intended, since Kotter says that Vinny should take her out to Yonkers Raceway. That raceway, incidentally, was established in 1899 and they're still around. Kotter appreciates their concern, but Julie just went skiing for the weekend, so he's gradually giving a little more information. Vinny says they should just leave Kotter alone, and he exits. Vinny has made his opinion known, but he's not going to push it right now. Juan repeats that she just went skiing for the weekend. Then he looks like he's holding back tears, and he exits. Freddie says it's not that bad. His sister's second husband stayed away only 6 months, and he exits. So I guess his sister got married. The first husband left for 3 years. During that time, she got a divorce, married another man, and he stayed away for 6 months, and presumably they're still together. After Freddie exits, Arnold says, "Be brave, little buckaroo," and he taps Cotter's chin. So again, Arnold with the older phrasing. He exits to laughter and applause. Kotter opens a very old-looking textbook, and I don't know if it's the one that we heard about in the Mr. Kotter Teacher episode, but we do know that they are given very old and out-of-date textbooks, which is a problem because it is social studies. It's not like it's math. He then starts glancing at the light blue and yellow papers on his desk, because they always have to have light blue paper and sometimes yellow. He closes the textbook, slams it on the desk, and stands. We can see Woodman through the open doorway at the drinking fountain. He comes in and offers his help as an assistant principal, but he can't help with a husband and wife problem because he's never been either. He explains he means that he's never been married. He'd rather help Kotter with school supplies or the teacher's pension plan. Gabe nonetheless tells Woodman that he's been married to Julie for 3 years, and this is the first time they've been separated. So I didn't realize it had been that long. Presumably they got married in 73 when they were both still in college. When Kotter explains, Woodman is horrified by the idea of a ski weekend in Vermont. Woodman has them both sit in student seats and tells Kotter something that very few people know. Woodman was once engaged to be married to the sweetest, purest girl who ever lived, Bunny Schuldenfrei. They were to be married on Christmas Day. On the 21st of December, Bunny went on a ski weekend to Vermont. Mr. Woodman doesn't know if it was Moonlight in Vermont, which is a song reference, or Max Leaked in Vermont. Max was a ski instructor. Kotter guesses that Max had tight pants. And I don't have a spelling on it, but I think it's Licht, sometimes pronounced licht, Germanic. Woodman nods. Max had tight pants and says that he also wore goggles. Woodman never saw Bunny again. She did send a postcard from the Alps. It was during the war, and Max was pretending to be Swiss, which is funny because I thought the cliche was that it was Swedish or maybe Swiss ski instructors. I hadn't run into the thing of it being German ski instructors. Woodman would never let a woman he loved spend a ski weekend in Vermont, and he exits. He is told a personal story. That's all we see of him in the episode. And I looked up the way that the calendars fall. The romance was probably in 1940 when December 21st was on a Saturday, and then the postcard could have been sent sometime between 1941 and mid-1945. And yes, this is another insight into what Mr. Woodman was doing in the 40s. Kotter looks even more nauseous. He stands and starts a routine as the fabulously handsome Max Licht Jr., which he does as a stereotypical German. Max describes Julie as skinny but cute, and there's not much meat there, but what there is choice, which is reference to the Hepburn and Tracy movie Pat and Mike from 1952. Max calls Julie Liebchen and suggests they mess around behind a snowdrift. They'll shush under the stars and hot dog their way to heaven, so ski terms, and he calls her cutie pie. As himself, Gabe calls her name and tells her not to do it. Max isn't even Swiss. As Kotter looks out the window, as if in the direction of Vermont, there's applause and a snippet of the theme song. When we come back, Gabe is on the couch on the phone. He's taken off his green jacket, but he has the blue sweater, etc. from the classroom scene. There's an address book next to the phone. He tells somebody named Marty that he understands Gabe called him last minute on a Friday night. This is all taking place in, I would say, 24 hours. The first scene where Julie is with the meatloaf is Thursday evening, maybe a little bit over 24 hours. Marty has plans, double dating with Eddie. They're going to see 2 Air Siam stewardesses from Bangkok. And that was a Thai airline that began in 1965 and actually ended in 76. So the joke would be dated even more quickly than you'd expect. The stewardesses will take their shoes off and walk on the guys' backs, feeding into stereotypes about flight attendants, particularly Asian. Kotter says coffee, tea, or ooh, instead of coffee, tea, or milk. He cheerfully signs off, but after he hangs up, he says the stewardesses are probably 2 waitresses from a bowling alley, because I guess he thinks that Marty and Eddie can't score with stewardesses. Gabe flips through the address book and calls somebody named Leon, and I notice that they have a push-button phone rather than dial. Gabe is very excited at first until he has to explain that it's Corporal Gabe Kotter from the Army. So we find out that Gabe was in the Army, and that might explain a little bit of why he got his teaching degree relatively late. I assume this was during Vietnam, but maybe he wasn't actually sent overseas, because I believe that he's from the class of 65. Gabe invites his old Army buddy to get together and kill a Friday night, but Leon has become a rabbi, even though he didn't used to be Jewish. So that takes care of Friday night because of the Sabbath. They do agree to get together Sunday night, so he's not totally blowing him off like Marty did. When Kotter tries to sign off with Shalom, he has to explain the term, which means goodbye, to Leon. After he hangs up, he mumbles that Leon must be a reformed rabbi, not as strictly Jewish. Kotter flips through the address book and for about 10 seconds struggles with himself about whether to call someone. And then it turns out to be Barbarino. Even though we can't hear Vinny, there's a bit of the wetware routine, and Kotter says nothing's missing, like Vinny thinks that Cotter's accusing him of stealing. There's applause as we fade to the next scene. There's a close-up of a pool game. Then we see everybody. From the left of the screen to the right, it's Freddie, Arnold, Kotter, Vinny, and Juan who's dealing. Kotter says he doesn't want to get in the way of any of their plans. Freddie, who's wearing a blue cap with thick stripes and different shades of blue, and in close-up it looks like it's recycled from blue jeans, says they wasn't planning anything special. He tosses in his chips, 2 blues and 3 whites. Arnold forgets how much that is, but Freddie says that's literally what he's betting because Kotter won't let them bet for money. Arnold, who's wearing a green eye shade, bets the same. Vinny sets down his cards and wants to talk to Kotter. Juan protests that they're playing poker here, but Vinny says he has to talk business. Kotter says he'll be right back and he gets up. He notices Arnold looking at his cards, so he takes them and folds. He joins Vinny. The other 3 quietly continue with the game. Vinny knows Kotter's depressed, so he thinks the 2 of them should go on a double date with Angel Weintraub and her older sister, who doesn't care who she goes out with. Kotter sarcastically says that the sister would even go out with somebody like him. Vinny says she's gone out with guys worse than him. Kotter knocks the black book out of Vinny's hands and tells him to put it away. They go back to the table. Vinny sits while Kotter says Julie has gone away for the weekend. He trusts her. He sits down and asks, if you can't trust your wife, who can you trust? Arnold stands and says, read 'em and weep. A full boat. He happily rakes in his winnings. Even though they're not betting for money, he's enjoying winning. Vinny stands and pleads with Kotter to let him call Angel. They argue a little and then Kotter has him deal. It's going to be 5-card forehead stud. Kotter says that sounds like a movie they aren't old enough to see, like a porno. Vinny explains the rules, including that they each have to put 1 card on their foreheads. Kotter thinks the game is dumb, but he still wants to play. When they all pick up their cards, Arnold tucks his into the top of his visor and laughs. Kotter has a 2 of hearts. Arnold has the king of spades. Arnold thinks they all look very ridiculous, especially Mr. Kotter, a grown man with a 2 of hearts on his forehead. Kotter laughs as he says he guesses he's out. Now he knows what a bad hand he was dealt. Even though Freddie and Vinny don't know their own cards, they both fold, I guess because they can see that Arnold has a king. Juan has tucked his card into the top of his sunglasses, so I can see why he's wearing sunglasses in this scene, but again, not in the classroom. He bets big. 5 whites, 5 reds, and 5 blues. When he leans back in his chair with a big grin, we see he has the 3 of hearts. He expects Horseshack to fold, even though he can see what a great card Arnold has. Arnold raises another 5 reds, impressing Kotter. Juan is still grinning, but he insists Arnold will fold, at first playfully, and then menacingly. Arnold calls him Epstein, rather than Epstein, but he does fold, and after that they slap hands and Arnold laughs, so clearly he doesn't doesn't mind. And it's interesting, Juan can intimidate Arnold, but it doesn't harm their friendship at all. We've seen that before. Kotter shakes his head like he can't believe them. Juan stands and says he has to go. If he doesn't get home by midnight, his mother gives his bed to someone else. And we saw what happened when he ran away and he didn't book his dinner. The others agree to end the game and they get up and go to get their jackets. Kotter wants them to stay, have soda, play another game, and he can put on records. Herman's Hermits, Jerry and the Pacemakers, which were both part of the British invasion, so definitely Cotter's generation, and Danny and the Juniors, which is actually a doo-wop group who did the 1957 hit At the Hop. Then he offers Danny without the Juniors and Jerry without his pacemaker. But the Sweat Hogs leave, out the front door for a change. Gabe closes the door and starts talking to himself. No wife, no friends, nothing here. Why is he here where there's nothing? He could be in Vermont where there's Julie and Max Licht Jr. He takes a suitcase out of the closet and says he'll go to Vermont. Since Vermont is cold with snow, he'll take a sweater, a bow tie, and a belt. As he's still gathering items and narrating, we see Julie come through the front door with skis. He gets mouthwash, shaving cream, and a razor from the bathroom. He gets a bathrobe for his cold ears. I guess he doesn't have earmuffs. When he gets back to the suitcase, Julie is standing there, her glasses on top of her head, and she does the okay sign like, yeah, that's a good idea. Wear a bathrobe on your head. He notices the skis and takes them from her. Then he realizes she's back, and he tries to act normal. She's home because she couldn't stand Candy anymore. Candy wouldn't stop talking. I just want to mention, the Cotters don't have a car. Maybe Candy did, but then did Julie demand to be dropped off? How did Julie get home? Obviously, Julie could have left in the morning, and so she's had enough time to get back. Maybe they got all the way to Vermont, and then Julie turned around, but how did Gabe think he was going to get up there? Maybe he was planning to take the train or something. The Cotters put their arms around each other until Julie asks what he's doing with the suitcase. He awkwardly tells her he's having a packing drill, like a fire drill. She looks at the abandoned poker game and asks what went on here tonight. He says he had one of his kinky parties. He says he has one every time she goes away. And so it's the second episode in a row where they use the term kinky. And of course, she's never gone away before, so she knows that it's a joke. They embrace again, and she says she missed him, even though they were only parted for a day. He admits he missed her a little. She says she could always catch up with Candy. She's sure that Candy is still in Vermont talking to an empty chair. And again, it would take Julie about 8 hours to get there. Gabe affectionately says, "You know I missed you, dummy," and he kisses her. And of course, that's what Liz Lemon's awful boyfriend Dennis would call her on 30 Rock. It feels somewhat out of character for Gabe, but we know that he definitely doesn't think that Julie is a dummy, because she's not. Then Gabe goes into his Max Licht routine, to her understandable confusion. He says that they're snowed in for the weekend, so they should bundle up. He backs her up so that she falls back on the couch. He sits next to her. She laughs as he calls her Liebchen and says it's easier than falling off skis. He leans down and kisses her, so she puts her arms around him. There's applause and just a hint of the theme, no lyrics. I don't know if he explains about his jealousy later, but maybe she just pieced it together that he was jealous of the ski instructors. They obviously are going to have sex now. In the tag, both Cotters are in casual blue. She's watering plants while he reads the paper, so this is at least the second episode where she's taking care of the plants. An article about a lumberjack strike reminds him of his uncle Sanford the lumberjack, so I guess they had to do some sort of lead-in. Sanford was a small guy, but a great lumberjack, and he impressed a big lumberjack by cutting down a tree with one chop. He said he learned to do that in the Sahara forest. Of course, it's the Sahara Desert, but apparently he chopped down all the trees and turned it into a desert. Julie laughs, but then she tries to water Gabe, starting to push back a little bit against the jokes. Well, this episode has some interesting background information about Gabe and a bit about Julie and their marriage. And I did laugh out loud a few times. I felt that it just didn't live up to its potential for a few reasons. I give each of these episodes a letter grade, like in a classroom. This one's a B-. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not terribly memorable. Maybe if Candy had come over and we met her and we saw the hostility instead of hearing about secondhand, she could have said, "Oh, I understand, you have to get permission." Like, "Oh no, she doesn't have to get permission, I want her to go." That would have been nice to set that up. Or if we had seen a quick scene of Julie in the ski lodge looking bored or feeling out of place because she's married and Candy is divorced and there are all these single people around. But we're supposed to live in Cotter's head, and he is pretty irrational. I mean, I understand it's the first time they've been apart, but as I said, they are apart for one day. And even if it had been one weekend, that he falls apart that quickly is kind of implausible. Also, just doesn't really give a good impression of who Kotter is. Although, in a way, it's kind of sweet that he calls the Sweat Hogs, those are the friends that he turns to. Although, yeah, it's kind of sad because his adult friends have their lives. They have plans for the weekend on a Friday night. The poker game was cute, but it wasn't hilarious. Really, the highlight of the episode, I'm going to have to say, was Woodman's anecdote about his ex-fiancée Bunny. And I also choose a head of the class for each episode, which is the person whose performance I most enjoyed, so I've got to give it to Mr. Woodman. And it's just not really an episode that I have that much to say about it. It just feels a little empty, a little weak, like it needed a few more drafts and some punching up. But it's not a bad episode. It wasn't painful. It was just, for season 1, it felt a little bit weak. Certainly, I would rather watch this than several of the season 4 episodes. Next time, I'll be looking at the episode The Sit-In, which I remember enjoying much more. And I believe also it has a different information about Julie and Gabe's youth. We'll see how that goes. In the meantime, you're a free person and you can do what you want as long as it doesn't hurt other people.
Tease him a lot, 'cause we